I destroyed my own family with 7 words. I don't love you anymore. I want a divorce. Those words shattered the heart of the only woman who had stood beside me when I had nothing. I believed I was protecting her from the dangerous world I had created as the CEO of a billion-dollar company. Instead, I made the greatest mistake of my life. Just hours after she walked away, she discovered she was carrying my baby. She never told me. 7 years later, fate placed a little boy in front of me. The moment I looked into his eyes, I felt something I couldn't explain. He smiled, and I was staring at my own childhood. That was the day I realized success had cost me everything that truly mattered. My name is Adrian Brooks, and this is the story of how I lost my family and fought for one final chance to bring them home. The day I asked my wife for a divorce became the day I lost the best part of myself. From the outside, I looked like a man who had everything: a billion-dollar company, respect, and success. But inside, I was already falling apart. My name is Adrian Brooks. At 37, I had built Brooks Dynamics into one of America's fastest-growing AI companies. Investors admired me, magazines praised me, but none of them knew I hadn't truly slept in weeks. Everything changed when Nathan Cole slid a sealed envelope across the conference table. Inside were photographs of my wife, Grace, being secretly followed. Then he warned me that Victor Hayes planned to use my family as leverage. Nathan insisted that no amount of security could protect Grace as long as she remained my wife. His words stayed with me long after the meeting ended, forcing me to consider a decision that would destroy us both. That evening, I drove home beneath a sky painted with orange and gold. Grace was in the kitchen, quietly humming while stirring pasta sauce. The warm scent of garlic and basil filled the house, reminding me that this simple place had always felt more valuable than my billion-dollar office. Grace smiled the moment she saw me and wrapped her arms around my waist, teasing that she thought she'd be having dinner with the dog again. I forced myself to smile back, hiding the fear growing heavier inside my chest. She had believed in me before Brooks Dynamics was anything more than sketches on napkins. She stood beside me when no one else did, and because I loved her more than my own life, I convinced myself that breaking her heart was the only way to keep her safe. After dinner, I quietly placed a folder on the table. Grace frowned, asking what it was. Unable to meet her eyes, I answered with 2 words that would destroy everything we had built together: divorce papers. Grace stared at the folder before looking back at me with confusion. She asked what was happening. I couldn't meet her eyes. The silence between us felt unbearable, until I finally repeated the words that shattered our marriage. She laughed once, thinking I had to be joking, but when she realized I was serious, the color disappeared from her face. Her voice trembled as she quietly asked if she had done something wrong. Every part of me wanted to tell her the truth, hold her close, and warn her about Victor Hayes. Instead, believing it would protect her, I told the cruelest lie I have ever spoken. I don't love you anymore. The tears filling Grace's eyes shattered something inside me. She searched my face for the man she had married, hoping he was still there. But the husband she loved disappeared the moment those words left my mouth. Without another word, Grace picked up a pen with trembling hands and signed the divorce papers. Every stroke of her signature felt like it was carving another wound into my heart. Yet I forced myself to remain completely still. Carrying only a single suitcase, Grace walked toward the front door. Before leaving, she turned back one final time and whispered through tears that she hoped whatever I was searching for had been worth losing us. The front door closed, and with it, the only place that had ever truly felt like home. I stood alone in complete silence, never realizing that Grace was about to discover something that would change both of our lives forever. Only hours later, Grace stopped at her doctor's office on the way to her friend's apartment. After reviewing the test results, the doctor smiled gently before speaking the words that neither of us could have imagined. "Congratulations, Grace. You're 8 weeks pregnant." The divorce became official in less than 3 weeks. I signed every paper without stopping, convincing everyone, including myself, that ending our marriage would keep Grace safe from Victor Hayes. It was the only choice I believed I had. That belief slowly became the lie I repeated every morning. Living with the truth was far more painful. Our home suddenly felt enormous, yet every room still carried Grace's presence, making it impossible for me to move forward. Her favorite blanket remained folded on the couch. Her coffee mug still sat inside the cabinet exactly where she'd left it. Even the faint lavender scent from her favorite candle lingered through the living room, refusing to disappear. I couldn't bring myself to move any of it. Every night I stopped beside our wedding photograph, wondering whether Grace had eaten, whether she was sleeping peacefully, and whether she hated me as much as I believed she should. Eventually, work became my only escape. Every evening I stayed inside my office until the first light of morning, convincing myself that success was easier to face than the silence waiting for me at home. About a month after the divorce, my office phone displayed a familiar name, Sarah Bennett, Grace's closest friend. I stared at the screen. Only a few moments later, Sarah called again. I still couldn't pick up. Deep down, I feared hearing the one question that would completely break me, the reason I had destroyed the happiest part of my life. Much later, I finally learned why Sarah had been trying so desperately to reach me. Only hours after leaving our home, Grace visited Dr. Emily Foster because weeks of exhaustion had become impossible to ignore. The examination confirmed what Grace never expected. Dr. Emily Foster smiled warmly before gently telling her that she was 8 weeks pregnant. In a single moment, everything she believed about her future suddenly changed forever. Grace sat completely frozen. She had walked away believing our marriage had ended forever. But now she carried our unborn child. Dr. Foster encouraged her to tell me the truth, and through tears, Grace admitted she wanted to. Before making her decision, Grace opened the divorce papers one final time. My signature filled every page without hesitation. There had been no phone calls, no messages, and no attempt to stop her from leaving our home. To Grace, my silence said more than any explanation ever could. Believing I had already erased our future together, she chose to protect both herself and the tiny life growing inside her heart. Grace gently rested one trembling hand over her stomach and quietly promised her unborn child that, even if Adrian never returned, the baby would grow up surrounded by love, never doubting for a single day how deeply they were cherished. The months slowly became years. Brooks Dynamics expanded across the country, while magazine covers celebrated my success. Yet every promotion, every award, and every achievement ended with me returning to an empty penthouse filled only with silence. One rainy evening, I searched my nightstand for an important document, but instead discovered my old wedding ring. I had removed it after the divorce, yet I had never found the strength to throw it away. I rolled the ring between my fingers until sunrise, wondering whether love could survive the lies we tell to protect those we love, never realizing that somewhere across the city, my little son had just taken his first steps without me. 7 years can disappear in the blink of an eye, or they can haunt you every single day. For me, they did both. Brooks Dynamics had become one of the largest artificial intelligence companies in the country. Our software powered hospitals, airports, and financial institutions around the world. The business I had once built in a rented garage now occupied a 40-story glass tower overlooking downtown Chicago. Everyone called me successful. I called myself lonely. My calendar was filled months in advance, yet every evening ended the same way, with silence echoing through an empty penthouse. I had stopped celebrating birthdays, ignored holiday parties, and avoided interviews that asked about my personal life. It was easier to be known as a billionaire CEO than as the man who had destroyed his own marriage. Grace never reached out. Neither did I. Some mistakes become so heavy that you convince yourself they're impossible to fix. One Saturday morning, my assistant reminded me that I had already skipped several company charity events. She insisted the board expected me to attend this fundraiser, and despite my reluctance, I finally agreed to go. The ballroom was alive with families, music, and laughter. Children painted miniature robots while volunteers handed out balloons and cupcakes. It felt warm and joyful, a world completely different from the lonely life I had been living. While answering questions from a reporter, something suddenly bumped into my side. A little boy, around 6 or 7 years old, looked up at me with surprise after accidentally crashing into me while chasing a blue balloon. The young boy quickly apologized and picked up the toy airplane he had dropped. As he smiled shyly and explained that his mother always said he ran too fast, I found myself smiling back without even realizing it. The moment Ethan looked up at me, something inside me stopped. His blue-gray eyes felt strangely familiar, and for a few unforgettable seconds, I couldn't pull my gaze away from the little boy standing before me. Ethan picked up his toy airplane and smiled shyly before explaining that his mother always said he ran too fast. I laughed softly and answered that maybe she was right. His warm, innocent laughter stayed with me. Then a familiar voice suddenly called his name from across the ballroom. Every muscle in my body froze as Grace hurried toward us. 7 years had changed her, but I recognized her instantly the moment our eyes met. Grace gently placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder before looking directly at me. Her smile disappeared, replaced by quiet shock. Neither of us spoke. 7 years of silence stood between us while Ethan looked from one face to the other in confusion. Ethan looked back and forth between us with innocent confusion before quietly asking his mother if she knew me. Grace hesitated for only a moment, then softly admitted that we had known each other many years ago. After thanking me for watching Ethan, Grace gently took his hand and disappeared into the crowd. I remained standing in silence, unable to explain why the little boy's face refused to leave my thoughts. It wasn't only Ethan's remarkable blue-gray eyes. His smile, the thoughtful way he tilted his head, and even the tiny scar above his eyebrow reminded me of my own childhood with unsettling accuracy. Sleep never came that night. By sunrise, I made the first real decision I had made in years. I would uncover the truth about Ethan, no matter how painful the answer might become. For the next 3 days, I tried convincing myself that I was overthinking everything. Children could resemble strangers. Coincidences happened all the time, and yet Ethan's face refused to disappear from my thoughts. No matter how many logical explanations I created, they all collapsed the moment I remembered his eyes, his smile, and the strange feeling I had experienced the instant we met at the fundraiser. Unable to ignore my instincts any longer, I contacted Olivia Grant, the family lawyer who had quietly handled my divorce years earlier. I told her I needed help, and she immediately sensed this had nothing to do with business. An hour later, Olivia placed a legal file in front of me. Grace had never remarried, and Ethan's birth certificate listed only one parent. My heart pounded as I realized the father's name was completely missing. I stared at the dates until the truth became impossible to deny. Ethan had been born almost exactly 9 months after Grace walked away from our marriage, and deep inside, I already knew what that meant. A wave of shock swept over me. I didn't need scientific proof to tell me what my heart had already accepted. For 7 years, I had unknowingly lived without my own son. That same evening, I drove toward the quiet lakeside neighborhood where Grace had built a new life. Tree-lined streets, children riding bicycles, and friendly neighbors created the peaceful home I had failed to give her years before. Standing at her front door, I barely had time to knock before Grace quietly opened it. We stood face to face in complete silence, neither of us able to escape the weight of 7 lost years. Grace quietly told me I shouldn't have come, but I answered that I needed the truth. After a long, sorrowful look, she admitted that I already knew more than I wanted to believe, and stepped aside to let me in. The moment I entered, I realized how different her life had become. Family photographs, children's drawings, and overflowing bookshelves filled the warm house. It wasn't luxurious, but it felt far richer than the empty penthouse I called home. One photograph immediately caught my attention. Grace knelt proudly beside Ethan on his very first day of kindergarten. The smile on Ethan's face was unforgettable, but beside him was an empty space where his father should have been. Breaking the silence, Grace finally revealed the truth. She discovered she was pregnant on the very afternoon I asked for a divorce, and every word she spoke struck my heart with overwhelming regret. Grace explained that she had wanted to tell me about the pregnancy and had even driven back to our house. But after remembering the words I used to end our marriage and hearing nothing from me afterward, she believed our future together was truly over. I finally confessed everything I had hidden for 7 years. The threats from Victor Hayes, the surveillance, the pressure from the board, and my desperate belief that pushing Grace away was the only way to keep her safe. Grace listened quietly until I finished. Then she told me I should have trusted her enough to let her make that choice herself. In trying to protect our family, I had stolen 7 irreplaceable years from all of us. Just then, the front door opened and Ethan came home wearing his baseball uniform. He looked from Grace to me with innocent curiosity before asking the question that changed everything. "Mom, is this my dad?" The room fell completely silent. Grace remained silent after Ethan asked if I was his father. Instead of answering immediately, she searched my face, as though deciding whether I had earned the right to hear him call me that after everything I had done. She finally knelt beside Ethan, gently brushed the hair away from his forehead, and quietly confirmed the truth. Hearing her introduce me as his father made time seem to stop as Ethan stared at me in silence. After a long pause, Ethan asked a simple question that shattered me more completely than any business failure ever could. He wanted to know where I had been all these years, and I had no easy answer. I admitted I had made a terrible mistake. Ethan innocently wondered whether I simply hadn't known where they lived. Fighting back tears, I confessed that I never even knew he existed until now. Ethan turned toward Grace for confirmation after hearing my explanation. She quietly assured him it was complicated, and to my surprise, he accepted the answer with the simple trust that only a child could offer. Without hesitation, Ethan asked if I liked baseball. I smiled through tears and admitted I had loved playing when I was his age. His face immediately brightened with excitement as he invited me to his game. Before I could respond, Grace gently warned me not to make promises I couldn't keep. Her words carried no anger. She was no longer protecting herself. She was protecting the little boy who trusted every promise he heard. I quietly promised I would be there for Ethan's game, and vowed that this time I would never let him down. For the first time in years, my promise carried the determination to become the father he deserved. Saturday finally arrived beneath gray skies and a cold breeze. For the first time in years, I canceled an executive meeting, ignored Nathan Cole's calls, and left every message from the board unanswered without hesitation. When I arrived at the neighborhood baseball field, parents filled the bleachers with folding chairs and steaming coffee, while children laughed across the grass. Compared to any corporate boardroom, this was the most important place I could be. Before the first pitch, Ethan spotted me in the crowd and ran over with a huge smile, excited that I had kept my promise. I answered simply that I said I would, watching his confidence immediately grow. Grace stood beside me as the game began. We watched quietly through several innings before she finally broke the silence, telling me Ethan had asked about me every single birthday since he was old enough to understand. Grace quietly explained that she had always told Ethan his father wasn't a bad man, only someone who had made a decision he would one day regret. I admitted I had carried that regret every single day since losing them. Over the following weeks, I stopped trying to become Ethan's father overnight. Instead, I earned his trust one small moment at a time, through homework, baseball games, building model airplanes, and simply showing up whenever he needed me. After a family movie night, I tucked Ethan into bed before quietly heading toward the door. He stopped me with a shy smile and softly called me Dad for the very first time, leaving me speechless. Outside, neither Grace nor I noticed the black SUV parked across the street. A hidden photographer captured our reunited family before reporting everything to Victor Hayes, who coldly declared that we had finally given him leverage. The first threat arrived on an ordinary Monday morning, but it wasn't delivered to me. While Grace was taking Ethan to school, someone quietly slipped an envelope beneath the front door of her peaceful lakeside home. Inside the envelope was a single photograph showing Ethan laughing beside me after his baseball game. Across the picture, 3 chilling words had been written in bright red ink, turning a happy memory into a frightening warning. Grace immediately called me, and I could hear fear shaking her voice before she even finished speaking. I told her I already understood the situation and promised I was on my way without delay. 20 minutes later, I stood inside Grace's living room while Ethan played upstairs, completely unaware of the danger surrounding him. Grace handed me the envelope with trembling hands and quietly asked whether this terrifying message existed because of me. Adrian quietly admitted the threatening message existed because of him. Grace didn't raise her voice or blame him. Instead, she looked completely exhausted, carrying the weight of years spent protecting Ethan from heartbreak and now from fear. Adrian promised nothing would happen to Grace or Ethan again, but Grace calmly reminded him she had heard promises before. Her quiet words carried painful truth, leaving Adrian determined that this time, failure was no longer an option. Within only a few hours, Adrian doubled security around Grace's home and Ethan's school. Refusing to let Victor Hayes control him through fear, he prepared for a direct confrontation instead of another sacrifice. An emergency board meeting was called inside Brooks Dynamics headquarters. Nathan Cole revealed Victor Hayes had proposed a merger, promising to end every hostile action against the company if Adrian agreed before Friday. The directors warned that rejecting Victor Hayes' merger would place Brooks Dynamics and thousands of employees at risk. They reminded Adrian of his responsibility to shareholders, retirement funds, and everyone whose future depended on the company. As Adrian looked around the boardroom, painful memories returned. Years earlier, similar arguments had convinced him to sacrifice the woman he loved. This time, he refused to repeat the same devastating mistake. That evening, Adrian accepted Victor Hayes' request for a private meeting. Standing before floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, Victor calmly remarked that Adrian had changed, while Adrian answered that he had finally grown up. Victor slid another surveillance photograph across the desk, showing Grace and Ethan walking home together. Adrian's anger ignited as Victor demanded the merger once more, making it clear that Adrian's family had become his newest leverage. Victor warned Adrian that rejecting the merger would cost him everything he had built. Instead of calculating financial losses as he once would have, Adrian calmly pushed the agreement back across the desk and refused to sacrifice his family again. Leaving Victor's office, Adrian declared that he could rebuild another company if necessary, but he would never trade his family for success a second time. As Victor claimed Adrian had destroyed his empire, Adrian realized his true empire had always been the people he loved. The following morning, financial news exploded with reports that Brooks Dynamics had rejected the $18 billion merger. The company's stock plunged, investors panicked, reporters surrounded headquarters, and the board demanded Adrian's resignation. That evening, Adrian walked into Grace's home where Ethan joyfully ran into his arms, calling him Dad. Holding his son tightly, Adrian understood that losing billions meant nothing compared to protecting his family, while Grace watched with quiet pride and renewed hope. The morning after rejecting the $18 billion merger, Adrian Brooks discovered that the greatest change in his life had nothing to do with money. The Brooks Dynamics board had officially voted to remove him as chief executive officer. Nathan Cole delivered the decision with visible regret, asking whether Adrian truly understood everything he was giving up. Instead of anger or disappointment, Adrian smiled calmly, knowing he had almost sacrificed something far more valuable than his career. Alone inside his executive office, Adrian quietly packed the few belongings that still mattered to him. A framed photograph of his parents, the notebook from his garage startup days, and Grace's hidden wedding photograph. As Adrian walked through the Brooks Dynamics lobby, carrying a simple cardboard box, employees silently watched him leave. Some applauded, others lowered their heads, but Adrian no longer measured success by wealth, only by becoming worthy of Grace and Ethan. The weeks after leaving Brooks Dynamics became unexpectedly peaceful. Every morning, Adrian prepared breakfast for Ethan before driving him to school, spent Wednesdays building model airplanes together, and never missed a single Saturday baseball game. One quiet afternoon, while helping Ethan finish a science project at the kitchen table, the little boy looked up with innocent curiosity and asked whether his father had really once been famous. Adrian laughed softly and admitted that some people probably thought he was famous. Ethan simply shrugged before smiling and explaining that he believed his father was much cooler now than before. When Adrian gently asked why, Ethan answered that famous people were always too busy, but his dad always showed up. Those simple words became more meaningful than any award, fortune, or newspaper headline Adrian had ever received. Grace noticed Adrian's transformation without him ever trying to explain it. Instead of expensive gifts or grand promises, he quietly proved himself through everyday acts of kindness, allowing his actions to speak louder than any apology. Adrian repaired the broken fence surrounding Grace's backyard, spent peaceful afternoons planting flowers beside Ethan, and later helped repaint the guest bedroom, turning ordinary family chores into precious moments they shared together. One freezing morning, Grace's car refused to start before work. Rather than calling a mechanic, Adrian remained in the driveway for hours, patiently repairing the engine despite the bitter cold, until the vehicle finally started again. Grace watched every quiet gesture from a distance, realizing Adrian was no longer trying to impress her with words. His steady commitment, patience, and consistency slowly began healing wounds that years of apologies never could. One peaceful evening after Ethan fell asleep during movie night, Adrian and Grace sat together beneath a sky filled with stars. After a long silence, Grace quietly admitted that she could finally see how deeply he had changed. Grace confessed that the greatest pain was never losing Adrian, but realizing she had never truly stopped loving him. Through tears, she admitted love alone was not enough, because she needed to believe he would always choose his family first. Adrian carefully placed a small velvet box on the porch table and revealed that it contained Grace's original wedding ring, which he had protected every single day. He asked her only to keep it until she truly believed he deserved another chance. Grace gently lifted the velvet box and held it close to her heart before reaching for Adrian's hand. Looking into each other's eyes beneath the quiet stars, they realized this was no longer another goodbye. It was the beginning of finding home again. 5 years have passed since I walked away from the biggest deal of my career. People still ask if I regret it. The answer has never changed. Not for a single second. Brooks Dynamics eventually recovered under new leadership. I remained a shareholder, but I never returned as CEO. Instead, I started a small technology consulting firm that allowed me to choose my own schedule. For the first time in my adult life, work fit around my family, not the other way around. Every morning began the same way. Grace brewed coffee while humming softly in the kitchen. I made pancakes. Ethan insisted mine were better, even though I secretly burned the first batch almost every Sunday. He was 12 now. Taller, confident, still carrying the same blue-gray eyes that had stopped me in my tracks at that charity event years ago. Only now, when he looked at me, he didn't see a stranger. He saw his dad. On a bright Saturday afternoon, Ethan Brooks stood proudly on the pitcher's mound during the state championship game. The stadium buzzed with excitement as cheering families, determined coaches, and hopeful teammates waited for the final moments to unfold. As the last batter approached the plate, Grace gently slipped her hand into Adrian's. With a quiet smile, she asked if he was nervous, and Adrian admitted he was feeling even more anxious than Ethan himself. The pitcher released the ball, the batter connected with a sharp grounder, and the defense reacted flawlessly. 2 quick throws ended the game, the umpire called the final out, and the stadium exploded with celebration as Ethan's team became champions. Ignoring the celebration around him, Ethan sprinted straight toward his parents. He hugged Grace first, then wrapped Adrian in a joyful embrace before shouting, "We did it, Dad." In that single moment, Adrian found a greater reward than every business success of his past. Later that evening, family, friends, and neighbors gathered in the backyard to celebrate Ethan's championship victory. Laughter echoed through the warm summer air as music played softly and the setting sun painted the sky with golden light. Holding a glass of lemonade, Ethan stepped onto the small wooden deck and asked everyone for a moment of attention. The lively celebration slowly fell silent as every pair of eyes turned toward him. Looking first at Grace, Ethan thanked her for making sure he never felt something was missing while growing up. His heartfelt words filled the backyard with emotion as Grace smiled through gathering tears. Ethan then turned toward Adrian and shared the lesson his father had taught him, that real heroes admit their mistakes and spend every day trying to make things right. Calling Adrian his hero left both parents overwhelmed with emotion. Later that night, after the celebration ended and Ethan had gone to bed, Adrian and Grace sat together on the familiar porch swing. Surrounded by peaceful silence, they reflected on the painful journey that had somehow brought their family back together. Grace quietly remembered the day Adrian handed her the divorce papers, while Adrian admitted he had never forgotten a single moment. Looking through the window at Ethan's championship trophy, he realized how completely his definition of success had changed. Adrian understood that success was never found in boardrooms, fortunes, or public recognition. It lived in hearing his son call him Dad without hesitation, holding Grace's hand, and waking each morning beside the people he loved most. Reflecting on the years he lost chasing an empire, Adrian accepted that his greatest achievement was becoming the husband and father his family deserved. Every honest choice, quiet sacrifice, and forgiven mistake had finally led him home. I destroyed my own family with 7 words. I don't love you anymore. I want a divorce. Those words shattered the heart of the only woman who had stood beside me when I had nothing. I believed I was protecting her from the dangerous world I had created as the CEO of a billion-dollar company. Instead, I made the greatest mistake of my life. Just hours after she walked away, she discovered she was carrying my baby. She never told me. 7 years later, fate placed a little boy in front of me. The moment I looked into his eyes, I felt something I couldn't explain. He smiled, and I was staring at my own childhood. That was the day I realized success had cost me everything that truly mattered. My name is Adrian Brooks, and this is the story of how I lost my family and fought for one final chance to bring them home. Thank you for watching until the very end. If Adrian, Grace, and Ethan's journey touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next emotional story. Share this video with someone who still believes in second chances, and tell us in the comments, what was your favorite moment in this story? Until next time, take care of the people you love, and we'll see you in the next story.